Hello and welcome to the Krannert Alumni Conference. I'm Tim Newton. This is the third session in the Supply Chain and Operations track, sponsored by the Global Supply Chain Management Initiative and the Dauch Center for the Management of Manufacturing Enterprises. Today's session is titled Leveraging Technology to Enhance Manufacturing Competitiveness. Our presenter will speak for a little more than half an hour, and then we'll answer questions from the audience. You can type your questions in the box on the lower right corner of your screen at any time during the presentation, and we'll get to as many questions as we can during our time allotment. Our speaker joined Purdue in 1996 and has served in a variety of roles in the Krannert School. He's currently the Department Head of Management, Director of the Global Supply Chain Management Initiative and the Dauch Center for the Management of Manufacturing Enterprises. He's also the Senior Associate Dean of the Krannert School. He's a renowned and widely quoted expert on operations and supply chain management. He's also consulted with several corporations. Please welcome the Susan Bulkley Butler Chair in Operations Management, Professor Anant Iyer.
Thank you, Tim. It's a wonderful opportunity to talk to our alumni and to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that is to sort of think about the role of operations, and in particular, manufacturing competitiveness. So I'm going to start off by first introducing you to our team. You may already have heard from Steve Dunlop, who's the managing director of the center. We also have two collaborators, Roy Vasher, who's a visiting assistant professor for us here at Krannert, and somebody with over 25 years at the Toyota Corporation, and Dr. Angus MacLeod, who's both a consultant as well as a partner with us here at DSCMI and DCMM. So one of the things I want to get you to think about is a bunch of ideas. And the first idea is I want to get you to think about the opportunity in manufacturing. And I want to frame this opportunity by thinking about a few components, 4 components: products made by manufacturers, the people who make the products, the process by which the product is made, and technology. Now, the title of the session is How Technology Can Help Leverage Competitiveness. But in of itself, it is not particularly useful. But in tandem with the other 3 Ps, it becomes a very potent device, a potent way to compete. In fact, one of the quotes which I like to use, which you may have heard it when Steve presented too, is a quote from a senior manager at Toyota who said, "First, we build people, then we build cars." So part of the question here is that technology should be thought of in terms of the people who use it, and the competitiveness comes from it being deployed by the people in the organization. So that's one of the ideas to sort of think about. So the agenda for today is to get you to think about a few things. The first is we're all in a situation right now where we're talking about recovering from the pandemic. And so when we think about this recovery, one of the things we need to be thinking about is managing the workplace to minimize workplace infections, and also operating within a supply chain. So a plant or a manufacturer has to see to it that they have supply from their suppliers, has to see to it that they have orders from their customers. So manufacturing has to operate within a supply chain. The idea I wanted to think about, and if there's one thing at the end of today's presentation I want you to think about, is to remember this term TP3, technology, product, process, people. And we think that this is a holistic way to think about technology. And I'll give you a bunch of examples of our efforts with some local manufacturers. So this is the general idea. Now, for each of these things, for each of these elements, what I'll do is talk to you about a few concepts, just general concepts and a way to think about it. Then to think about ideas or decisions one can make. And finally, to think about opportunities. So this entire presentation is going to be framed as the opportunities that open up as we move to what might be called the new normal. And the reason a lot of us are calling it the new normal, and here at Purdue, we've been challenged to think about, what is the campus when students are back? How much can we leverage some of the things we did during the pandemic in terms of giving them access to information that can be accessed in a more convenient fashion above and beyond the classroom. So let me first get you to think about products. And the first thing I want you to think about is that what we've been through the entire last year, and I'm going to think about the time when this started last year as sometime around March of 2020, and we're now sitting in April of 2021. So in March of 2020, we really were in a stage, at least in the Midwest, that we were in stage one, where companies were running their operations, but they had scaled down some of their operations. There was a period in which there was a total shutdown of manufacturing. And hopefully now we are at the later stages of stage three. So one of the questions, one of the ways to sort of think about it is that the first stage was managing operations during the pandemic. The second stage was, what do you do with people when the manufacturing is shut down, but they may still be on your payroll? What can you do in terms of training? What can you do in terms of things people can do working from home? And finally, stage three, where we want to come back, be competitive, be productive, but we're facing a lot of challenges. Many of you today may be hearing about chip shortages and what that is doing to the automobile industry. So there are lots of volatility we need to deal with in stage three. So one of the things to be thinking about here is to really understand the current supply chain and the future supply chain. So here are some ideas to consider. So on the supply side, there may be new components we can use. There may be current products that would be replaced. So business would be changing. And we may need to think about new operations, and I'll give you some examples soon. And we may need to think about supplier diversification. And this last part is something that's an interesting idea for everybody, for manufacturers to be thinking about. Many of you in the news may have heard about the ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal that caused a lot of backup. Well, you might ask, what's the Suez Canal got to do with a manufacturer? Well, there are a large number of components that come by sea, because shipment by sea is obviously a lot less expensive than shipment by air. So what happens if your sole supplier is somewhere in Asia and your product has been delayed 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks? What do you do? Well, a lot of thought that, the kinds of ideas to sort of think about is, can you have a dual source? Might there be a second supplier who charges a bit more, but is available to deliver product quickly? Those are the kinds of things to be thinking about. And as a supplier, offering oneself up to be this dual source who can tool up quickly and provide delivery becomes an interesting sort of idea. The second thing to consider is the demand side. Now, in some areas, it's easy to see what has been happening on the demand side. Clearly, in retail, customers are getting more used to ordering online and curbside pickup or home delivery. But there are many other things that are happening whereby the mix of products that consumers are ordering is changing. And so forecasting demand is going to be particularly challenging. Some of the things that you may already have heard about is that during the pandemic, when everybody was stuck at home, people started looking at the kinds of ovens they had and the freezers and the refrigerators, and demand for high-end ovens, freezers, refrigerators went up dramatically. Manufacturers weren't expecting it. So what ended up happening is actually an increase in demand for high-end product with the great margins. The real challenge is, how do you get all the components to make them made and delivered? Now, I want to get you to think about this business as an opportunity. So one of the things that the opportunity that shows up here is opportunities for product development, and also opportunities for upskilling of the workforce. So notice that if you had employees on your payroll who are working from home, then working from home, given the time freed up, that time can be used to develop new skills and new capabilities. One of the things that I've tried to do myself is try to see if I can learn some new things. Machine learning tools to analyze text data, or various different kinds of pattern recognition tools. These are all new tools becoming available. One never has time to do those, to catch up on those tools, but finding a proactive way to provide credit to your employees to upskill becomes a tool that you can leverage when they come back to work. Uh, Reshoring of production. There's a lot of discussion that's been happening regarding potential reshoring. I'm not claiming it's easy. It's a complicated problem. But if in fact local domestic companies are competitive except for an additional 5 or 10%, then now's the time to go back to OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, and offer yourself up as a second source of capacity. It actually turns out that even if you are 10, 20, even perhaps 30% more expensive, if you can deliver quickly, it actually makes sense for the company to place orders with you. And so that's something which is an opportunity. There are, of course, core business changes. Some of you may already be noticing and reading about the transition in the automotive industry, where people are moving from the internal combustion engine to the electric vehicle. Those are all big changes, and those big changes will be manifest in terms of how suppliers get affected. And some of the changes that are becoming very significant is that many manufacturing plants did not permit suppliers to visit their plant. Plants had to be contained, and all interaction was online. But the fact that all interaction is online also means there needs to be a conscious digital strategy to engage with suppliers and to engage with potential customers. So many of you may have heard, and I'll address it later, the idea of a digital twin. And a digital twin allows you to have the experience of the product without having, requiring to physically go to the location and touch the product. In your younger days, you may have seen Flight Simulator and all of those things, which are trying to recreate a physical experience in a digital sort of context. The same thing is happening much faster now with new tools permitting that sort of engagement. Of course, there are market changes going on that people have to adjust to. The key question here is to really think about adjustments in the product mix to remain in sync with demand. And that's going to be the challenge. When the market comes back, and there are forecasts that the market may come roaring back, what will people buy? Would they want to buy more stable, more reasonably priced product? Or would they want to have many more options? Do they want to focus on treating themselves when we come on? These are all choices that customers would make. And the challenge will be to keep up with those choices, because not keeping up would mean sacrificing potential revenue. Now, what is the challenge? On the employee side, the key is, how do you build trust with the employees? Now, where is the problem? The problem really is that when people are working from home, and there are periods in which plants furloughed them, so basically they shut down operations, the question for people is, how will I survive? What will happen to my family, etc.? And the best examples of companies are those who've kept their employees updated through notifications directly through their phone. One local company built an app, and that app had all the information available for them to file papers to get federal grants, for them to get unemployment benefits, for them to get to any one of those things. It also guaranteed them support in terms of access to healthcare, up to the minute information on how to keep their families safe. All of that ends up being something that in the past manufacturing companies didn't have to do, but now doing it becomes key. One of the things that has become key is, if you have a large increase in demand, you need help. You need people to work overtime. One of the worries is an employee who comes to work and gets infected takes that home and infects their family. So it's important for the family to be convinced that everything in the environment is kept safe. Now, notice that my title said technology. So pretty soon we're going to talk about how do we use technology to keep track and ensure that such things happen. So here are some things that are likely. Chances are more shifts. And that is, how do we catch up with production, run more shifts? More space. If you're going to keep people separated, we need more space. More people working from home, some or all days, and this is going to happen even at Purdue. And in some companies, smaller headcount, fewer people because we have less business, and some of the business has moved offline. So here are some things that will end up becoming key. One is the word agile adaptation to infection control advances, and upskilling. We already talked about dashboards, etc. The key is managing the crisis. So even today, while we're all looking forward to normalcy soon, at various parts of the world, there still are emerging crises, mutations of the virus, which will require us to potentially be aware and adjust to the current environment. One of the things that helps a lot is employees that are multitasked. So if person A has to not show up because they're quarantined, then other people may need to pick up the slack. And so that means we may need to consciously keep track of who is multitasked to cover things. So here's a little picture, and on the rows you get a number of people: Arun, Debs, Lindy, and Fred. And on the columns are a number of tasks. The circle and the fraction of the circle covered shows how skilled they are. So if it's blank, then Lindy can't really do anything in terms of the first two columns. But if it's solid, then Fred is fully equipped to do the first task, which is complete shift change briefing. Well, how does this little matrix help? First, it allows one to ensure that most of the tasks have a backup. That is somebody who's not perfect at it, but knows enough about it to step in. The second, if there are gaps where there isn't a fallback, now's the time to do something to fix. So for example, if you look at machine maintenance, then we realize that Lindy is the only one who's partially trained and there is no backup. Well, that means this is something we need to do something about. And of all the tools, this might be a tool worth thinking about immediately. For us here at Purdue, one of the things we had to do is all through the latter half of the spring and the fall semester and the spring semester, all faculty who were teaching online, it's only a small fraction who were doing so, or people teaching on site, had to have a backup faculty member who could step in case they needed to quarantine and wouldn't be able to meet students. So one of the things that we have developed is a number of sort of mini courses that people can take, and what we call bite-sized learning. And so this allows people to learn in little bits, perhaps when they get a little time here, a little time there. There are lots of op-ed pieces that are emerging these days. That learning really needs to be synchronized with the time available by the learner. So education is changing, and the delivery of that education is changing. So this can be done using a podcast, this can be done using people's phones, etc. So a few things that I do want to summarize here is, how does one compete and grow? So you would notice that I've been framing a lot of these things as opportunities and not threats, and to really take the glass half full strategy. And one of the words to think about is the word agility. How does one build an agile team? How does one enable multitasking? And how does one reward and recognize people? So these are all things to be taken. Now, one of the things I want to introduce you to a couple of other sort of terms. One of the terms I want to get you to think about is the term VSMI, which is value stream mapping plus an infection layer. I'll give you an example in a second. So what this means is that value stream mapping was a methodology initially popularized by Toyota. And the focus was to eliminate waste and focus on building a lean organization. So that's what value stream mapping was focused on. So one of the things I'm going to show you is a value stream map and see how that can be useful as one thinks about leveraging technology. So here's an example of factory operations where there are a number of steps in this manufacturing, cutting, welding, etc. And the new thing that we have to add to this value stream mapping is the idea of infection risk. So here's a picture. So this picture will show you, this picture shows you a number of operations. And in each of these operations, these circles are circles with a diameter of 6 feet. Now, why do I draw these circles? Notice that if you needed to have social distancing, then anytime these circles overlap, you have a potential problem, right? And this overlapping becomes a potential problem, particularly for a mobile worker. If you look at a supervisor at work, they're walking around. And if you want them to social distance, then you have to anticipate how people are going to move around. So the first thing to do is we can just build such a picture. And one thing we can do is to figure out how do we adjust the system so that we can protect everyone. So give me just a second. I need to just go back. So here is that same operation slightly adjusted. So what does slightly adjusted mean? Now, if you draw 6-foot diameter circles, none of the circles overlap. What did we do? We moved a few people regarding where they're working. We're going to add some sensors to people that will give you a beep if you're within 6 feet. We will quarantine incoming parts if necessary. And we'll make all the aisles one-way aisles, because if you have very narrow aisles and people are walking past each other, it's very difficult for them to ensure social distancing. So what is this? Already I've introduced you to an idea that we need to adjust the layout and adjust our lean value stream map. But I also introduced this idea of sensors. And some of you may have noticed or have heard that companies are adopting Bluetooth sensors that you wear on your wrist. And it'll automatically detect and let you know if somebody is in the vicinity. Well, those are the kinds of small introductions of technology that can be deployed across all the people. And the information that we would do and publicize here is the information back to families saying, don't worry about somebody coming to work. We have anticipated that we've got to take care of them. We've adjusted the layout. We've deployed the technology. And we can ensure that work is being done in a safe environment. Just to let you know, one of the things that many manufacturers have done is made a lot of these plans public to share it with many people so that manufacturing plants can open and they can be successful. So just to give you an idea of how this is deployed, one can use CAD software, computer-aided design to get these implemented. Now, one thing to sort of think about is you might argue that if we try to do things with respect to infection mitigation, will it have a negative impact on being lean? In other words, will it add in some work in process inventory, etc.? And the position we're taking is it's really that we need to be able to redesign facilities to be safe, but to be efficient. So one of the things I'm going to move on to next is give you sort of a list of ideas of technology that is being deployed. So here's some technology. So the first thing I want to do is provide a concept and give you a bunch of examples. The one concept I want to get you to think about is that technology adoption needs to be re-examined. Why does it need to be re-examined? I'm going to show you with a picture that it may be economical to adopt technology at far lower volumes. And the kinds of technologies we're talking about are really scalable, reconfigurable, and decentralized. What do each of these things mean? Scalable means you could introduce it in one portion of the plant, see how it works before you expand. Think about the little sensor watch, right? in steady state or fully scaled, everybody would have this watch. It would beep, give you this information. But you can obviously adopt it in one portion and see how it works. Reconfigurable. What if instead of 6 feet, we say things are getting better with the vaccine, you only need to distance 3 feet? Well, we can adjust. It's reconfigurable. It's decentralized because adoption can remain something that is a local decision, but you could also choose that you would store all these signals and notifications centrally. How you do it is a negotiation with the employee base. So that is the idea of the kinds of technologies we're talking about. So let me give you a bunch of examples. So before that, let me sort of start off with a little conceptual picture. I can't help being a professor in such settings. So imagine that there is a cost of technology in the y-axis and the volume on the x-axis. And if you adopt the technology, there's a certain cost, and this is the cost. Okay. But instead of the technology, let's suppose that there's a labor unit cost without adopting the technology. And so if you draw this line and you look at the intersection point, which is A, then that can be thought of as the break-even volume. In other words, to the right of A, you would adopt the technology because it's cheaper. To the left of A, you wouldn't adopt the technology. So this is what all of us would think about. Now, what changed? So I'm going to claim that during and after the pandemic, when we care about employees, we'll really have to have more employees, and therefore our labor cost per unit would go up. Well, what happens if the labor cost per unit is going up? Notice that the break even of the technology moves to the left. So even at smaller volumes, it makes sense to sort of consider adoption of technologies. Now, what happens if more people start adopting these technologies? The cost of the technology decreases. Well, that means the break-even point becomes even lower. Okay. So what is the message here? The message here is if people had dismissed the technology saying it's too expensive, then they should re-examine it during the pandemic. When labor costs have been going up, we cannot get people to work together, so we've got to separate them out, etc. But as adoption increases, you'll notice that prices will decrease. So let me walk you through some technologies. So one technology is cleaning robots. So one of the things that happened in our house is that very early on, we bought this Roomba robot and a Brava robot, and it basically goes around cleaning the house on a schedule, cleans and wipes down gives you both garbage collection as well as wiping down all the floors. Well, the same thing can happen in manufacturing settings to preserve hygiene. If you don't want your custodial staff to interact with too many people, you can use industrial robots. But a second thing is an assistive robot. Assistive robots come in play when two people have to work together on a task. Now we only have one person because the second person will be too close by. How do we assist the first person? We can use assistive robots. The third is sensor-based tracking and alerts. One of the things we've been doing here at Purdue is working with our faculty in electrical engineering. We've actually designed a low-cost Bluetooth and RFID-based sensor, which just shows up as a tag. It's a reconfigurable tag, which means we can have it send an alert under different parameters. Individual employees would just wear the tag, and it would alert them if we decide 6 feet, it would give you an alert at 7 feet saying, hey, person close by. This information can be collected and disseminated. It can be organized in any which way. And we're in beta tests with some local manufacturers to test such tags. For a while, and I'm not claiming this will remain permanent, for a while there were object quarantines, cleaning down surfaces, depending on where they came from, etc. And these are things that need to be adjusted for. One of the things, and in fact, we had a speaker at our conference. One of the things that is making its appearance is the use of UV technology. So if you are in a hospital, hospitals use UV technology to completely sanitize operating rooms. The problem with UV technology is that people have to leave the room so that this technology can be deployed. One of the things that is, there was a company based in Indianapolis that created a UV robot. So when everybody goes home, this robot goes throughout the facility, it completely disinfects the facility, and thereby sees to it that the facility is clean. Okay. Something that can be adopted that everybody would be in favor of because it's really enabling infection control. The same can be thought of as virucidal cleaners. These are now being deployed. There are lots of options available, and distributors make it available. I mentioned earlier that a lot of interaction with suppliers is happening digitally. So in the retail space, one of the words they use is the word omni-channel. So many of you may already have interacted with your grocery store where you could order online and get it delivered to your home. You could order online, for example, at Walmart, you order online, you click a button saying you're on your way. They can track your phone. They can see where you've pulled up. You just pop open the trunk. They come, they put all the material in there, close the door, and off you go. Well, how has that changed things for Walmart? Actually, one of the things that's particularly interesting is the moment Walmart made it so convenient to pick up goods from Walmart, they actually had a big increase in the market segment that shopped there. They also had a big increase in the spend bill because people started buying more things. So this is a retailing example. The same thing is something for manufacturers to consider. How can they engage with both their customers and their suppliers who may need products at the last minute, suppliers who may let you go pick up curbside? All of those things are new technologies to consider. One of the things that's become easier and easier is to leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence. Just a couple of days ago, I'll give you an example in my own case. Part of my role is to get feedback from faculty regarding how they were doing during the pandemic and how it affected them on their teaching, research, student service, and overall. So we're a large department. There's a lot of text you get from a lot of people. The question is, how do you make sense of sentiment? Well, it actually turns out that if you have the data in Excel, you can just add in Azure machine learning, and all it does is it allows you to analyze your data. It takes it to the cloud, runs the analysis, gives you some sentiment analysis right in your Excel spreadsheet. Well, this has made machine learning, text analysis so much easier. So some of these things are tools that have become so easy that really there's no excuse to not adopting them. One of the things that we've been experimenting with some partners is video analytics. So data collection is always a chore because it requires somebody to put in all of the data. It actually turns out that the best data collection is with a camera. And a $100 camera properly mounted, collecting video data can actually provide you a tremendous amount of information. Remember that when video is collected, you can actually look at successive frames of a video to detect lots of things, to detect machines operating, to detect, if appropriate, how many people are working in each facility, how quickly things are being transported, how much inventory is accumulating. There's a tremendous amount of information that can be extracted from this video and be used for decision making. So we've been working with our students to use some of the tools. For example, there's a lot of easy to use tools such as OpenCV is a tool which you can download, take a little piece of video and start playing around and extracting data. I mentioned the idea of digital twins. If people can't physically visit your facility, there is the option of using the data collected from the facility to create a digital twin. The best example of a digital twin in Lafayette, Indiana is General Electric and their engines being built in the plant in Lafayette. Every engine being built, all the data associated with the construction of the engine is captured at a very detailed level so that now every engine has its digital twin in the data world. So when that engine is on an airplane and flying, all of the data that's collected allows various maintenance personnel to anticipate adjustment, anticipate and proactively maintain that engine. Some of you may already be familiar with augmented reality and virtual reality. And the main difference between the two, in virtual reality, it's a make-believe world. In augmented reality, you're adding information to an existing world. Various newspapers have already publicized AR and VR. The Wall Street Journal, if you're a subscriber, delivers free glasses, or you can print them and make them yourself. And you can actually be in an immersive environment. You wear those glasses and you're in Rwanda, where the World Food Program is dealing with some drought, and you are in some other location in Afghanistan. You're literally in the battlefield or in the location. And the main idea with AR is that as you move your head, you see different levels of detail. One of the things we've been thinking about is how to make it so that students can have an immersive experience with a plant tour without physically going on the plant tour. This is something that many of you may have heard. Adjusting the airflow is one important tool to maintain infection. Purdue did it for all of its classrooms, many other people. Okay. And finally, of course, remote learning. We did offer that in the latter half of spring and to select students who could not come to campus, but remote learning has now become the norm and people are getting comfortable with it. And it's a great way to enable adult learning where the learning is available at the point in time that people are available. So a few quick summary. One, I hope you remember TP3 or TP3. What does it mean? Technology, product, people, and process. In my discussion, I presented technology last, not because it's an afterthought, but because you need everything else in place for it to be successful. The key capability that technology gives you is the agility to respond to the market, the agility to deploy your people, adjust your processes, to create the products that the market wants. The agility to adapt to supply chain demand and supply. Notice that I started off saying I like to use the word opportunity. Part of what makes us a university, makes us a great alumni base, makes all of you great alumni of Purdue, is the fact that that's the way we think about the world. We think about what can we do to enable competitiveness. So glass half full means there's 50% more capacity to fill. So a summary, this is what we've been doing. One of the things we did during the pandemic is create a book. And this book is called Smart Manufacturing, the New Normal. And one of the things we're doing is creating a lot of content that we're working with a number of companies around us, around Purdue. We have a grant from the Lilly Endowment that allowed us to interact with about close to 280 manufacturing companies in the 10-county area surrounding Tippecanoe. And all of them have been trying to figure out ways to compete, to leverage technology, to deliver and satisfy demand, and thereby be an effective and manufacturally competitive organization. So I look forward to questions from you. I hope you learned a bit, and I hope that we can continue this engagement with you. What we do at the center, both at DISME and GSCMI, the Dauch Center, as well as the Global Supply Chain Management Center, is create opportunities for our students to engage with companies and thereby enabling our faculty to learn about real-world issues. We're always open to engage with you. The easiest way to get started is to contact Steve Dunlop, Managing Director of the centers, and we'd love to chat with you and figure out how to bring all of the assets of Purdue, which is really our students, our faculty, and you alumni in one place. Thank you. Tim?
Anand, thank you. A lot of great information there. You mentioned during the presentation looking at cost analysis. And I just wonder, did you find that manufacturers, in fact, did increase technology adoption during the pandemic?
Yes, in the following sense. They started exploring them. Some already implemented them. An example is we were working with a company that implemented cobots. Cobots are assistive robots. We're working with other companies that implemented this VSMI map that we talked about. In fact, we have examples where they have told us how they reorganized all of their workforce. So yes, but in selective bits. No one person did everything. Some people did cobot. Some people started using augmented reality for equipment maintenance. Other people started using some version of this machine learning, what we call no-code apps. So yeah, different people started adopting different things. We actually had far more attendance in our conferences during this pandemic period because it was easy to attend. You could attend the conference and get back to work easily. Otherwise, to come to campus, attend the conference and go back. So yeah, so that has been our experience. That the people have been either adopting the low threshold technologies immediately and are discussing the higher sticker point technologies.
Along those lines, do you think that the new normal, and when we say new normal, I think everybody agrees, at least in terms of the way we work, it's going to be different than it was in 2019, and probably the same thing will happen in manufacturing. But do you think this new normal will bring about a more interesting manufacturing work environment with greater adoption of some of this cutting edge technology?
Absolutely. I think you're right, on the money there. One of the issues with manufacturing is not too many people have visited a manufacturing shop floor recently. You think as the manufacturing shop floor as being a noisy, unclean environment, and that could be as far away from the truth as possible. My strong suggestion is modern manufacturing environments cannot afford dirt and grime because then quality would suffer. They have to be kept spotlessly clean. They're using a lot of what are called computerized numerically controlled machines. So you're interacting with the machine through software. So things are changing, but there is room. And one of the things that a lot of industry talks about is what's called Industry 4.0, which is really adopting these scalable, decentralized technologies, things that are distributed. I mean, the phone, it actually has AR capability. You can take your phone, and when you switch on your camera, it has augmented reality capability. And so, for example, one of the things I can do with my Pixel phone is it can auto translate through your camera. You just point the camera at a document, it translates, and it can read it out for you. Well, those kinds of things have become so easy to use that will be the next generation. Now, the reason we're bullish on manufacturing is first, we're in the Midwest. Purdue has a very large engineering school, and we as Krannert have always had a strong position and an interest in operations. And there is a tremendous amount of new capability, particularly if you add 3D printing. Because with 3D printing, you can produce on demand. And as the technology's price point becomes competitive, you can create personalized manufacturing. That's the holy grail. And so I am bullish on the fusion between increased adoption of technology and how much fun it would be to be in the manufacturing space.
Along those lines, and I asked this same question to Steve Dunlop during one of our earlier sessions. You mentioned the fact that manufacturing in 2021 is much different than it was 10, 20, even probably 5 years ago. How do you convey that to students who may not be aware of the possibilities that they can get into in manufacturing and get them interested in the field?
So the number one thing, which we couldn't do in the pandemic, is plant tours, to literally take them to the facility, because nothing beats going to the facility, talking to a few people, and actually seeing what happens. Locally, our students go to the Subaru plant. Amazon has warehouses close by, and there are lots and lots of opportunities. One of the things, I mentioned that we counted 280 manufacturing companies with more than 20 people just in the 10-county area. So within a 2-hour drive, there's a tremendous diversity in manufacturing. Plant tours is number one. The second is to actually have senior people talk to students about what their day is like, what they do. One of the things that I think we've been doing a study to see how globally connected companies in the region are. We just plotted the imports from all over the world by all the companies in our area. And literally, very quickly, you've spanned the entire world. And we're only talking about 10 counties around Tippecanoe, including Tippecanoe. So I think that the few messages are manufacturing is global. There's a lot of technology at work in manufacturing. And finally, it's exciting. I would think, I've heard from many of my friends that Silicon Valley thinks the next big growth area is for them to be in the Midwest. And I say welcome, because all of us at Purdue would love for you to be here.
And you get 4 seasons in one day. What could be better, right?
Exactly.
Great weather. You mentioned those 280 companies within a 10-county range. As you've talked to them, do you think that they're open to finding new ways to compete?
Absolutely. And the reason is because, it is a global world, which means if you have an original equipment manufacturer and you're across the street, but there's somebody halfway across the world who's 5% cheaper, you're done, right? You got to find a way to close that gap. And the reason is because that OEM's manager says, look, my goal is to maximize shareholder value. Just figure out a way to compete. So this pressure on competition, if it has caused many of the local companies, if you look at their investment in equipment, Swiss machines and robots from here and all of these things, it happens because they have to be globally competitive. And from my perspective, I say that's a good thing. We at Purdue have to be globally competitive. Our faculty have to be globally competitive. And that keeps us on our toes. That's what gives us an extra edge. So it's absolutely the case. That is the case. In addition, one of the things that people are worried about is all the transitions happening in industry. I mentioned that the automobile industry is going to transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. This is going to involve a lot of changes. And one of the things is, how do I position myself? So these are the kinds of questions we're trying to engage with companies on. Now, in order to do this, and I want to fess up, people always worry that professors and students come, they talk to you, they get an idea, and then they go away and don't help solve the problem. So one of the things we're trying to strongly emphasize is that we're here to solve a problem and learn from the solution of the problem, which means not just proposing the solution, but proposing a solution and talking to people to see what got implemented. Because I think it's this last part that gives some credible training to our students. So currently, up to this point, we've historically engaged a lot of our master's students. As of this semester, we started involving several of our undergraduate students. So we think that this portion, which is the experiential learning connected to experiences in manufacturing, that I think is the key. And many companies are at least open to seeing it. Now, granted, we still have to earn their trust. At the end of the day, they have to trust us to be interested in their problem and not our problem. So if we can solve their problem, I think they're in business. The worry is very often in the past, faculty solve the faculty's problem.
Right.
We're trying to change that.
Well, to close things out, I wanted to get a quick plug in for your fall manufacturing conference, because we've talked a little bit today about electric vehicles. I think that's going to be a fascinating topic, and a topic that really is starting to come to the forefront now in the automotive world.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Yes, our fall conference in September is going to focus on opportunities for manufacturing because of the transition to the electric vehicle. The transition to the electric vehicle is going to have many effects. Any of you who want to look at it, the UAW has put out a white paper on what they think is going to happen and how they can see to it that their members can participate. Various think tanks, the Brookings Institute, etc., have put out proposals. But there are some areas that have been wildly successful. Many of us are watching enviously as Bloomington, Illinois, attracted the Rivian plant and created all these new jobs for thousands of people when Rivian got a contract to supply trucks to Amazon. Our conference is going to focus on those opportunities. How can companies plan for the transition? Those who think that their products are going to be phased out, what other products can they start using their capability to do? Those who see opportunities, if you're in motor manufacturing, well, there are going to be a lot more motors in the electric vehicle. If you're in engine manufacturing, you need to figure out something else to do. If you're in transmission manufacturing, well, sometimes there might be wire harnesses that might be the source of. So all of those are things that we want to bring to bear. And finally, we don't want to forget the local economic development officials, because they are the ones who bring everything together. So we think about this transition as a transition of an ecosystem. So if you want to hear more, please be on the lookout on our website. A lot of information will be there, and we look forward to everybody's participation. And just as I mentioned in my presentation, we will always have an omni-channel where you can join us via Zoom, and you can ask questions via Zoom and engage with us. So this is going to be a new channel, which we did not have way back in the past, which is a year and a half ago, where we're going to have from now on.
Well, Anand, thank you, and we look forward to that. Thanks again for a great presentation and all the work you do with both the centers.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Thank you to everybody who joined us, and I look forward to continued engagement. Thank you.
All right, our next session in the Alumni Conference begins at 2 Eastern. It's titled SAT Exams in High School and College Admissions. It features Professor Jillian Carr. Don't forget to join us at 7 o'clock tonight Eastern Time for our keynote session with CNBC's Ron Insana. His talk is titled The Next Wave, New Technologies That Will Transform Your Future. Ron's going to take a look at breakthroughs from 5G to AI to regenerative medicine and discuss how they change the way that people live, including the ethical considerations that they raise. Now, please note, tonight's lecture will not be recorded. The only way to watch it is to tune in live at 7. There's still time to register on your Alumni Conference app if you've not done so already. And so that concludes this session. Thank you for joining us.